If you were asked what the most important organism in a food chain is, it wouldn't take much logic to come to a conclusion. It must be the producer. The producer is the one that provides all the energy. They extract energy from sunlight, and without them, the whole ecosystem would be messed up. I want to make an equal case, or at least a near equal case, of the apex predator. The apex predator is the one at the top of the food chain, and talk about how important that position is. The case study that I'm going to use is the Yellowstone National Park. From hunting and other human activities a long time ago, we eliminated both of the apex predators from Yellowstone National Park. We eliminated the grizzly bear and we eliminated the wolves. Since then, we've been trying to get them back because the park went to shambles. There's a whole bunch of bad things happening. And then when we reintroduced them, something really magnificent happened. The wolves started controlling the population of deer in the area. And then the deer, having something to fear again, they no longer stood near the rivers. And now, like next to the rivers, just walking around near their water source with nothing to fear, they obliterated all the trees. Any new tree that tried to grow would be quickly either trampled or eaten, like the top of the shrub would be eaten by the deer, and man, everything was struggling to grow because there was an overabundance of deer. The second you introduced the wolves, something really cool happened. The deer started getting pushed back. They started, their patterns in the environment changed, and suddenly you had new growth of trees and shrubs all around the river systems. With that growth came new snakes, new weasels, new birds of prey, all different sorts of animals started coming back into the Yellowstone National Park. The biodiversity shot up, and you had a totally dramatically different look of the ecosystem. And on top of that, that started changing the way that even the river looks. The river, with new trees and shrubs to hold the soil in place, they stopped eroding so much, and you ended up with a new curvature to the rivers. It's quite remarkable that all came from the reintroduction of wolves. Every ecosystem we look at, the wolf or the other apex predator has a profound impact on that ecosystem. Almost bar none, without them, a lot of bad things happen. Now, obviously, if you eliminate a producer, there can't be an ecosystem. But almost as equally dramatic is what happens when you lose your apex predator. Everything gets messed up. And it's not quite the same with some of the ones in between. Some of the intermediate organisms on the food chain can be replaced by other intermediates. But man, that producer and the apex predator are both extremely important to their environment. Since the apex predator has such an important role in the ecosystem, we need to be really aware of how we mess them up, because we absolutely can. Today we're going to explore a mechanism in which we humans can, and definitely do, affect the apex predator inadvertently, accidentally. So, we are going to look at a case of a chemical called DDT. DDT was used used as a pesticide to kill insects back before the 1970s. That DDT was an effective pesticide. We knew that if we sprayed it on our crops, it was in a low enough concentration that even if you ate corn for years from that field, you wouldn't get, as long as you washed it, you wouldn't get enough of the DDT inside your body to even come close to affecting you. But it was enough to kill the insects. Hooray, we get more corn. We get more of whatever crop that the farmers wanted to grow. That's what we wanted. And that's economical. It's an important issue as well, like how much money we make. So this DDT, we were spraying it on things, and it was making its way into the water systems. As we talked about in the last lesson, pollutants, DDT included, can move around between soil, air, and water. So if this chemical is being sprayed on a field, rest assured that it's leaching down into the groundwater. And then that groundwater slowly makes its way to surface water, things like rivers and ponds. So you're ending up with these concentrations of DDT inside of a pond. The little insects, the smallest organisms, the plankton in ponds, they absorb that DDT from their surrounding environments. Maybe even when they're consuming algae, the algae absorb some of the DDT, and then those insects, the zooplankton, might eat the algae and get that poison into themselves. And this is where it starts getting interesting. Those zooplankton, the small insects, they're not even that concerned with the little bit of DDT that they're getting. Mostly because their lifespans aren't even that big. But then along comes something like a minnow, tiny little fish. Tiny little fish eats many, many, many zooplankton, tons and tons of these little water insects. Every single little bit of DDT inside of every single little insect that one tiny little fish consumes all gets funneled, concentrated into that one fish. Now, DDT is concerning. It starts getting concerning when you start looking at organisms that have longer lifespans, because DDT doesn't break down very quick. Depending on the organism, it can take anywhere between 2 and 15 years to break down. So let's look at the next level in that food chain. There are bigger fish. Let's imagine like a perch. Comes along, eats a minnow. Eats another minnow. Eats a whole ton of minnows. All of that DDT that was concentrating into a minnow gets concentrated into several minnows, and then all of those minnows get concentrated into one perch. All of that DDT, all of that poison. And remember, it doesn't break down quickly. So you end up with this organism, this fish, that has higher and higher amounts of DDT. It goes around eating its food source, and it continues to collect more and more and more of this stuff because it can't get rid of it. Keep going with that idea. Next, imagine birds of prey. Birds of prey are, they capture fish from rivers, lakes, and ponds. It's remarkable to see something like an eagle or a hawk dive down into water and come out with a fish. It's a pretty cool experience if you've never seen it. But they eat several of those bigger fish. And again, all of that toxin, all of that DDT that came from the zooplankton, all funneled into these tiny little fish, minnows or something, and then all of those little minnows funnel it all in towards a perch, and then all of those perch funnel into very long-living organisms like a hawk or a falcon or an eagle. The net result from that was we were watching several birds of prey population dwindling, like rapidly. Over a number of years, you saw populations in the tens of thousands drop down to a few dozen. Particularly in the case of the peregrine falcon, they came the closest to extinction before we intervened. The DDT had concentrated so much in their body that they were not producing their eggs properly. The eggs were so brittle, the shell was so weak that even the mothers trying to sit on the shell to keep the egg warm, as is customary for birds, sitting on the shell was enough pressure to crack the egg. And birds are light. They're very hollow bones, which allows them to fly. Birds are quite light. So that was traumatic for their populations. It was a disaster. Their populations just plummeted. very few chicks were being born. And we finally traced it back to one chemical called DDT. And we figured out the mechanism. This mechanism is called biomagnification. When in small amounts within the base level, the beginnings of a food chain, you have just tiny amounts of the toxin, not really enough to be concerning, but then all of that toxin ends up concentrated into the next level. Now there's lots of them still, like you go from zooplankton, which are in the millions, to minnows, which are maybe tens or hundreds of thousands in a pond, and suddenly all of those start funneling their toxins into perch, which may be in the thousands inside of a lake. And then maybe even a bigger fish, like a jackfish or a trout, funnels even more of that chemical into those bigger fishes, which may be in the few hundreds inside of a pond. And then you have a couple of hawks around that pond or lake. Just a few, that end up getting all of those toxins all at once. That's biomagnification. The rapid increase in concentration as you go up the food chain. So like I started this video out with, I was mentioning that the apex predators have a profound impact on their environment. Biomagnification has a huge impact on them, and it's kind of a silent killer, because we think that what we're doing is safe to the environment, and we don't even realize what some of these chemicals do until it's too late, until it's already concentrated in the apex predators, because that's where we start seeing the effect. It's not until that concentration, until that ppm gets magnified to a dangerous level, that we start seeing the effect. And again, once it's already in them, like in the case of DDT, it doesn't come out, not for a long time. So it just decimates populations, and then we try and backpedal, and we're trying to save an ecosystem. We did have great success with the peregrine falcon. We were able to take the peregrine falcon population from a few breeding pairs up into healthy numbers again, but we intervened. We started taking the eggs from the birds. We started putting some of those birds into captivity. We were using conservation efforts to make sure that those birds kept living. Because again, like they're an important one to save. They impact their entire environment and their ecosystem. They were an important one to save, and we did that. We humans, we screw a lot of things up, but we also do a lot of great things. And this is a case where we did something awesome. We screwed up, and we fixed it, and we banned that substance. And now there's a little bit more regulations on what kind of pesticides and what kind of chemicals we are allowed to introduce into our environment. So let's summarize. Apex predators are an important part of an ecosystem. They have a very large overarching effect on everything, all the animals in the ecosystem. Now, biomagnification is when a chemical of some sort of toxin is introduced to an environment, and that toxin magnifies from the smaller populations into it funnels all of the toxins into the apex predators or into the top predators, and it magnifies the concentration, the parts per million inside of those organisms. In some cases, that level of concentration is deadly. It's to the point where you're killing off organisms by the droves, and obviously not a good thing. So biomagnification is the magnification of toxins into the top of the food chain. Usually leads to devastating things. So anyway, that's all for this video. Just talking about biomagnification, but it's an important one when we're thinking about any pollutant. It has the potential to do that. It has the potential to biomagnified. So we got to be aware of it, and got to make sure we cover our bases, or else we see ecosystems collapse. So that's all for this one. Thanks so much for watching. Till next time.